What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast version of this video. This feels weird to record on purpose a long form version of this. Historically, what's happened is I've had every intention of just releasing one version of a video, and then as I get into the edit, I feel like, oh, but there's so much content in here that at least I know some people will want to listen to, but not everyone. And so then I end up kind of along the way in the editing process deciding to release two forms of the video. Now, if you're wondering why the longer version of the video, at least historically, has been unlisted, meaning you can only access it if you have the link, is because the longer form content typically doesn't perform as well on YouTube. And when something doesn't perform as well, it dings your channel in the algorithm. So by posting the video as unlisted, the data about that video's performance I hope, don't affect my entire channel's performance within the YouTube algorithm. But this way, by releasing it as a podcast, hopefully only people who are interested in the longer form podcasty things will click through that. I don't know. I'm going to experiment with it and maybe it'll still ding me in the algorithm, but this is just a way for people to still find the long form content, whereas the unlisted stuff, you have to kind of know where to click through and it's less accessible. So I'm going to experiment with it. Thanks for joining me if you're watching this or listening to this one. And I'll try to be mindful that audio is very important and visuals are not something that people are always looking at if you're listening to the podcast, as is the nature of a podcast. Now, to be honest, with those of you who are watching this in podcast form, I've been having kind of the YouTube creator version of writer's block, just like the last few months or so. And it's not necessarily that I don't know what I want to talk about. That's not true at all. I have so many ideas. But sometimes it's like an emotional block of like, I have so many fears about, well, what kind of comments are people going to say in that video? And I wish I could be the kind of person that's like, whatever, it doesn't matter, I don't care. I do care. So I'm trying to figure out how to find a healthy balance of, sharing things that are important to me while also taking care of myself, but not focusing so much on just staying in my comfort zone that I don't really say anything important. So that's kind of my journey right now. Also, it's summertime. I live in San Diego. The weather is amazing. And I honestly have been spending as much time as I possibly can outside. And that's my version of procrastinating, working on things. As I go garden, I play outside with my kids. So I have no regrets about that, but that's maybe part of my writer's block, so to speak, as well. But I'm hoping that by intentionally releasing some of these kind of podcast versions of the episodes, I can feel a little bit more released to kind of say more of whatever I want. I don't know, I guess I could say whatever I want in any video, but I guess I feel more freedom for some reason if I know I'm releasing it as a podcast, because maybe it's like if you clicked on the podcast, you were kind of expecting to sign up for a longer form version of the video. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. We're gonna try this. We're gonna experiment. So all that prefacing to say, part of the backstory of what I'm gonna focus on in today's video is that I had one idea and then I shifted to another idea and then I just didn't want to do that idea. I don't know why I didn't want to do that idea. It wasn't even a controversial topic. I'm sure I'll probably just do it like next week or the week after. But for some reason, I just felt like going through some of the comments in my recent videos and responding to them. Now, some of the I picked through the comments. So some of them are direct questions about something I spoke about in that video. So I can maybe answer those questions to the best of my abilities. And some of them are just comments that don't contain a question, but I might just be reacting to. I am choosing to blur out the username of folks' comments, even though they're public comments. You could go to those videos and see them too, just because I don't want it to feel like, I don't know, I'm putting somebody on blast or something like that. Or if that person decides to delete their comment and become anonymous or something, I want them to have the freedom to do that, since they didn't necessarily ask me to put their comment in a video like this. And I think you can expect in the podcast version of this video that not only will you get the unabridged versions of my responses to these comments, but I think I might also just put more comments in this video than my official video, my main video, that is going to be much shorter. So that's what you're in for today. All right, so I'm going to start with my most recent video and then just kind of work my way backwards. I definitely kind of handpicked comments that I felt like responding to So do with that what you will. I don't necessarily want to respond to every comment. It is what it is. So here we go. From my most recent video, which was responding to your questions while I was kind of doing like a travel vlog situation, here's a comment. It was so nice to be part of that train ride and your visit to that cute little California community. Thank you. I'm glad you felt that way. Maybe travel videos are your next calling? Probably not. I totally understand the importance of dispelling the myth about the longer in the field, the more effective you are. So just kind of prefacing before I continue reading this comment, I had said something in my Q&A video about how research shows on average that folks earlier in their career, their therapy careers, are more effective in their clinical outcomes, and the further along we get in our careers, the less effective we get on average statistically. It doesn't mean that we're all failing as we get older, but that's just the data. And I was saying that to encourage somebody who was kind of earlier on in the field. So here's what this commenter says. However, I think that's been overemphasized. I understand for new grads that's probably reassuring, but I can say for sure that experience allows you to get comfortable with different scenarios and client reactions, which helps stay grounded when doing tough work. I also think that this emphasis can lead to ageism, which we've got a ton of in society, sure, for sure. On a totally different note, you are probably going to get questions about your hair products. Okay, so thank you for this comment, first of all, and I appreciate the nuance in it. First, I'll say they started by saying this seems overemphasized, this idea that folks who are newer in the field are more effective, which is an interesting perspective because that's actually something that I didn't hear until like a few months ago. So if it is overemphasized, I'm not in the bubble where that's getting overemphasized. So that stands out to me. Maybe I just missed that memo, or maybe nowadays it is getting more overemphasized. So that's interesting to hear. But I appreciate the rest of this. Understand, for new grads, it's probably reassuring, but I can say for sure that experience allows you to get comfortable with different scenarios and client reactions. I completely agree with that. I mean, Marie today, compared to when I was first licensed, and certainly compared to when I first started seeing therapy clients as a practicum student in grad school, I mean, I am way more comfortable. Back at the beginning, I felt very like, I don't know what to do. And so part of my coping for that was like, let me make sure I follow the intervention by the book, which on the one hand makes complete sense to say if I'm using whatever therapeutic intervention, follow it by the book. And it also kind of limited me in the sort of artistic creative freedom that can come with that point in your career where you feel like I definitely like have that therapy intervention in my back pocket and I know exactly how to implement it, but also for this particular individual that I'm working with or particular therapeutic context, I don't know, I might kind of veer off a little bit intentionally because this person might need this, and that kind of artistic creative freedom is something that I have way more access to, and I at least hope it benefits at least some people. So I completely agree with that statement, and I'm grateful that I'm not new in the field because that was so uncomfortable, at least for me at the beginning. And then the next point this person makes, I also think that this emphasis can lead to ageism, which we've got a ton of in society. Thank you for pointing that out. Agreed. And I am still relatively young in the grand scheme. Like I haven't even reached the halfway point in life. Hopefully I got some time. So I am the one that's benefiting in many ways by making this statement that earlier in our career we're more effective, and I would never want that statement to create a scenario where somebody who's been in the field for a long time to feel like all of their work, all of their wisdom, all of their efforts are null, because that's absolutely not true. The hope is to say that we are effective earlier in our career, even when we're not feeling comfortable, and we have the opportunity to be intentional throughout the course of our career in order to keep improving our therapy outcomes, and that it could be possible by the end of our career, by later in our career, to be absolutely more effective than younger generations because we've been putting in that intentional effort the whole time. So thank you for that point. Oh, and then questions about my hair products. This will probably just be bonus content for the podcast, but yes, I was spraying something in my, I think this is the part that they're referring to. I sprayed a couple things in my hair because I think it had been something like a week since I had washed my hair and I just didn't feel like washing it, which is not uncommon. It's not uncommon. And I already go 7 days between hair washes, true statement. So I was probably on like day 8 or something like that. And I sprayed dry shampoo in the roots areas and what was it called? Not Your Mother's sea salt spray, kind of more on the tips here and then kind of scrunching that up. And that is my trick. I don't know if it works or not, but that's my trick for trying to make my hair look less dirty than it is. Basically by making it more dirty, because then I'm trying to make it look like it was intentional that my hair looked dirty, rather than like my hair's dirty and I covered it up with more dirty products. You can judge me if you want. That's totally fine. That's just how I just prioritize hanging out with my kids more than washing my hair. What can I say? Okay, next question. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself since I'm not even an intern yet, but I know burnout is an expected issue for counselors and their clients. I have one question. Suppose someone does not have the resources to take a break. What advice would you give them? What good resources are out there on burnout recovery? Whew. Well, I have to be honest. One, I'm not an expert on burnout recovery, so I think what I'll do is I'll dig in after I film this video to see what resources are available for burnout recovery for therapists and link to them below. So let that be a clear disclaimer that this is not like my area of ultimate expertise. But with that said, I'm really glad that you brought this up, because there was actually another comment thread that I'm not going to read out loud in today's video, where one commenter was saying, we're ethically required when we're burned out to step away and take a break. And then somebody responded saying like, hey, not everyone has the luxury of taking a break, which I so empathize with. And often, like, if you're in a position of burnout, you're probably burned out because you didn't feel like you could take a break up until then. So if it felt accessible financially and otherwise to take a break from your work, maybe you would have done so earlier and kind of skipped the whole burnout thing. You would have maybe felt like I can take breaks whenever I need to or often enough, and therefore not burn out. So this is definitely an issue, and so it feels valuable to reread this comment, bring this topic back to the surface, because absolutely burnout is so common, and I am assuming that a big reason for that is because it's so financially difficult for so many therapists that it feels like I have to keep showing up to work in order to pay my bills. Now, I know there's other reasons why folks burn out, not just financial. I mean, maybe you have all the financial resources in the world and you've still burnt out, and it could be because you feel, emotionally obligated towards caring for your clients, even though you really need a break. You don't feel okay kind of leaving them or passing them along to somebody else, etc. There's many reasons somebody could burn out. But to answer the question, if somebody doesn't have the resources to take a break, what advice would you give them? I mean, I'll reiterate some of what I said in the video, that it would be really helpful to identify at least the source or sources of the burnout, whether it's something about your workplace, something about your finances. It could be some constellation of reasons why you're burning out. And so even if you can't take a break from your work altogether, can you at least make some changes to wherever the source is from? So if it's, working with a certain, presenting issue, maybe is kind of causing some degree of secondary trauma for you, or, whatever it might be. And if you can shift the types of folks that you can work with, even if it's the same number of folks on your caseload or whatever it might be, make those changes. Or if it's something about, the environment you're working in, is there anything you can change about that? I mean, it's nuanced because everyone's in a different situation, but if there are any tweaks you can make to the causes, the sources of your burnout, I hope you can feel empowered to try to look for those and make changes, at least try some changes to see if it has any benefit for you in your burnout recovery. But yeah, I'll follow up and list whatever resources I can find on burnout recovery below as well. Let's take a look at one more comment from this video. It was nice to hear about effectiveness as baby therapists. So somebody who's kind of on the other take of what we heard about earlier. I wonder if you would do a video about choosing a pay scale as a new private practice therapist. I found that it can sometimes feel like I'm not allowed to charge as much or more than people with more experience. But if I followed that, my practice would just not be sustainable with what it costs to live here as a younger adult who is trying to survive in this economy. I have no desire to overcharge anyone and really want therapy to be affordable. In fact, this is an area I could see myself being an activist in the future. Amen. More power to you. I do want to be able to sustainably be a therapist for many years to come. Yes, please. That is my motivation to charge what is reasonable for me to live in my area. Anyhow, sorry for the rant. It's just been a bit stressful. I've definitely lowered my prices some because I felt like I was being corrected by another seasoned therapist for charging a higher rate than her for a specialty method we both offer that is a longer service. Wow. Whew. I basically prorated this service based on my normal cost, and she just charges the same amount. There are so many layers to this comment. First of all, I am so sorry that you were corrected by somebody else for charging what you charge. I think first things first, as therapists, I don't think we have the right to correct other therapists about what they charge. Someone has the freedom to charge what they charge, and you have the freedom to charge what you charge. And if somebody else is charging more than you for the same service that you've been doing for longer, that is their choice. I don't know what to say about that. And if they're able to find clients who are paying that price, I mean, that's their freedom. We don't know the details of a person's choices and financial situations, so it's not appropriate to offer commentary about what you think somebody else should charge. So I'm so sorry that that happened to you, commenter, that somebody corrected you. But with that said, I'm not surprised that this happened to you. I've heard people discuss this, at least behind closed doors, quite often, like, oh, did you see that so-and-so is charging such and such for their service and they've only been in the field for this long or whatever, and they're charging more than I am or whatever it might be. I do hear therapists do that all the time, and I think I used to be one of them. I can't remember a specific memory, but I think I used to be one of them. And thinking like the narrative could continue, like, oh, they don't care about, making therapy accessible or whatever it might be. But the thing is, this commenter is highlighting exactly why somebody would charge so much. It's not that we're greedy, it's that we're trying to pay our bills. And unfortunately, in order to make adequate compensation, it is quite expensive, a rate that we need to charge in order to do so. That is the way the system is set up right now. It is unfortunate, but one individual lowering their prices isn't going to resolve that issue, because now that individual therapist has to pay the price for it. Now, some folks who maybe have been doing this for a long time could get away with charging less because, I don't know, let's say, I'm just thinking of in my area, for example, I live in a particularly expensive area. If you've been living here for a really long time, let's say you're a homeowner and you bought your house 10 years ago, 20 years ago, your monthly mortgage might be something like $3,000 or $2,000 a month. But if you moved into this area in the last couple of years and you're trying to buy a house, the monthly mortgage that you're looking at is probably something more like $5,000. It could easily be $8,500 for a modest home. So when you think of it that way, to say, well, how does it feel reasonable for the person who maybe bought their home when the market was totally different to comment to the younger person who maybe is in an earlier unstable phase of their finances to say, well, you can't charge that much. Maybe that's what that person needs to charge in order to even come close to the same cash flow that you might have because your housing expenses are so much lower. Or maybe you're partnered with somebody who is able to jointly offer kind of financial stability in a way that somebody else might not have access to. Or maybe this person is carrying debt to a degree that you don't have, or something like that. So there's a slew of, maybe this person is financially caregiving for their loved one. There's a slew of very compassionate reasons why somebody might choose to charge potentially a lot more than somebody else for the same service and not have ill intentions for it. So I know that was a long rant, but it feels really important to say, well, everyone has the freedom to charge whatever they want. And if, a potential client doesn't want to pay for it, they have the freedom to choose not to pay for it. But that's not something we need to offer commentary on to fellow therapists. And I'm actually really sad to hear that for this commenter, they actually adjusted their prices, it sounds like kind of begrudgingly, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like I have to. You can do whatever you want within legal reason, and you have the legal freedom to charge what you want for your services. So, okay, let's move on to a different video. We're going to take a look at the video where I gave feedback on some of y'all's websites, which I really enjoyed making that video, and you can look forward to more videos coming as a series of that. Somebody commented on the video, how much self-disclosure would be appropriate on the website? Could you share an example? Thank you for all the content, by the way. Thank you for watching. Great question. This comes up a lot in the comments of my website course as well, because I'm basically advocating to say that like some amount of self-disclosure is incredibly useful when it comes to building trust with potential clients, whether it's on your website or anywhere. It could be on, an online directory. It could be even over the phone during an initial phone screen. It could even be during moments in session as well. But how much self-disclosure would be appropriate on the website? It depends. So that's why I don't have a prescription of disclose this much, because I'll say for me, I've opted to disclose arguably quite a bit. Also, I post these videos to YouTube, and you see windows into my personal life through PrivatePracticeSkills that I would not share at all for folks who are potential therapy clients, but it's all on the internet, so therapy clients can come find this, and they have and do. So there's that too. But that aside, private practice skills aside, even just within my practice itself, I have a lot of self-disclosure. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that I've personally chosen that. One reason is because the specialty that I work within is one that is, let's just say, has a very, very dark, storied past, where I'm a Christian therapist who specializes in LGBTQ care, and historically, and not historically, unfortunately presently, folks practice conversion therapy, which is extremely harmful, and this is something that was provided by folks and is provided by folks who identify as Christian therapists supporting folks who identify as LGBTQ. So it feels extremely important that I disclose clearly not only what type of therapy I provide, but also very clearly on how I hold that space at the intersection of faith and LGBTQ affirmative care, that this is not conversion therapy. Let me tell you a little bit of my story of how I arrived at this affirming place. And so that's something that I've opted to do because it feels specific to my specialty, that kind of disclosure I think could be really useful to the right type of client. So that's a reason why I choose to self-disclose quite a bit. And alongside that, I tend to work with clients who lean towards being highly boundaried. So I'm not tending, my target demographic isn't a group of folks who has trouble containing boundaries. If anything, the folks I tend to work with tend to be so highly boundaried that it can be helpful to have somebody kind of gently kind of tug at their boundaries a little bit to say, whew, it's okay to unwind a little bit. So the risk of somebody kind of intervening my boundaries, what's the word that I'm looking for? Invading my boundaries is a bit lower, a lot lower with the types of clients that I work with compared to some. So that kind of highlights a couple of things to think through. The questions that I ask are, start with, well, what's your comfort level of how much you want to self-disclose? If you don't want to self-disclose, don't self-disclose. But if you feel comfortable disclosing everything, that doesn't mean go ahead and disclose it. So the next thing to think through is what sort of self-disclosure could benefit potential clients, especially in helping them build trust with you. And then the third question that I would ask is, what kind of boundary level your clients and ideal potential clients have. Obviously, every individual is different, but if you're working with a group of folks who has trouble containing boundaries and holding boundaries, then it can be really helpful for you to hold your boundaries and not self-disclose so much. But even with that said, if let's say like all three of those variables are kind of constrictive, like you don't feel comfortable self-disclosing, potential clients don't need to hear that much of your own story in order to build trust, and also potential clients have trouble holding boundaries and they need you to hold the boundaries more so, it's still appropriate to leverage self-disclosure. And I'm using air quotes because I mean it in a less traditional way. It doesn't mean like, here's my whole story, let me tell you everything. But it might look like, over the years of work that I've done, I've come to learn the value of, I've come to learn through, I've changed, I've grown, I've reflected, You're acknowledging yourself as a human within the context of the work that you do, even if it's not telling anything about yourself at all. Even something like, I'm very passionate about blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have to be like, I became passionate about this because I went through this experience in childhood that made me it could just be, hey, this is something that I'm really passionate about through my own life experience. You don't have to tell anything about your life experience. So there's ways to still self-disclose while being highly contained if that's what's most appropriate. But I think some self-disclosure, even if it is highly contained, really helps humanize the therapist, which really helps potential clients build trust with you. Okay, I'm sighing a little bit because when I set out to make this video, I was thinking about, I'll respond to some of the questions from the Q&A video that popped up in the comments. And then as I went back through some of my most recent videos, well, it's only a couple videos back that I made the last week's video was hard video, where I was commenting about how we speak to each other as therapists, inspired by the video that I made about Freud, which people had a lot of things to say in the comments there. Actually, wildly supportive. Let me go on a sidebar and just acknowledge just how supportive so many of you are. Like, the emails that came flooding, like, I just was blown away. And it was like a helpful reality check for me too, to realize, like, oh yeah, most of the people watching my videos are not like commenting every single time. I don't comment on the videos I watch hardly ever, almost only when it's like my friend posting. I'll, like, you know, if I'm friends with somebody else on YouTube, then I'll post on their videos because I'm cheering them on as their friend. But I might really, really like somebody's content and watch all their videos and never have left a comment ever. And realizing, like, yeah, that's probably true there's people who watch my videos who've never left a comment, and it's a subset of people who leave comments. And so I'm getting this kind of information about that subset of people when I read the comments. So anyway, I'll probably just put that tidbit of information in the podcast version of this. But thank you to those of you who decided to reach out and offer kind feedback. I tried to respond to as many of you as I could, but this is a good problem to have. There were so many of you who offered kind feedback that I didn't even get back to all of you. So thank you for that. That was very kind. But let's dig into this. I imagine I'm not going to get to all of these comments, except maybe in the podcast version of this. So let's just see what we find. Okay, so this one is like a little mini comment thread. The first person says, I think you would have gotten a much different response in a platform like PESI, or do people say PESI? I'm assuming they're referring to the online education platform for therapists, I assume, where you know people are actually therapists. I'd be surprised if most of the extreme comments are really from therapists. Thanks for sharing this. And then somebody responds, try looking at therapists' social media, especially those attempting to educate therapists in any way, and you'll see incredibly judgmental viewpoints and black and white thinking. There are many therapists that seem as if they haven't done any personal work for themselves and don't have any insight into their own actions. Whew, I mean, that follow-up comment feels harsh, especially the second sentence saying that they haven't done any personal work. I think most therapists have at least attempted to do personal work, and the question is kind of how effective that personal work is. Now, this felt like an important comment thread to highlight because on the one hand, I read the first person's comment and think, like, wouldn't that be nice if it was just like non-therapists offering their commentary that's, you know, not necessarily fully informed in the way that a therapist would be informed. But as I read that first comment, I thought, no, I'm pretty sure these are therapists that are offering some more harsh feedback. When I say harsh feedback, I'm talking about like taking down someone's character, pretty black and white thinking usually, and not really like regarding a compassionate perspective for somebody who has a different view than you, or at least not in the way that they're approaching each other. So then this follow-up commenter is saying, like, hey, if you look at therapists on social media, especially those attempting to educate therapists anyway, you'll see judgmental viewpoints and black and white thinking. And though this isn't across the board in any way, I have been surprised in my own experiences, especially on social media, but also in person, for just how harsh therapists can be towards each other, especially when providing feedback. And there's a tangent that I feel I need to go on as I talk about this, because I have historically been that therapist. And I mean, we could trail off on like why I've been that therapist before. I mean, I grew up in a very narcissistic household, and so, you know, I've leaned towards a more narcissistic perspective until I broke ties from the, narcissistic abuse. Obviously, there's a whole story there, and I'm not going to get into that whole tangent, but call it being young and naive, call it being narcissistic, catching fleas from the narcissism in my household, or whatever else it might be. I totally have been the therapist that's like, whoa, you're not supposed to do that. That's unethical. That's a HIPAA violation. You should know better. And there's something about the framing of it, because we can offer correction to each other. And I think obviously we're touching on like ethical HIPAA, big capital N no-nos. It's a good idea to give feedback to each other so that we can make sure we're providing best care for our clients in the work that we do. But there's a way to do it. And I have definitely taken the like, you should know better, shame on you type approach. I don't think I use the phrase shame on you. I have seen people use that phrase. People have said that to me. But kind of that undertone, like you should have known that. We should all know that. There's something wrong with the fact that you don't know that. This feels important to talk about because as a person who's very much been that therapist offering the black and white feedback, on the one hand, I completely agree this is unacceptable and we need to change it, and I sure hope that I am making some of those changes, and I'm definitely trying to not take such a black and white approach. But also, when we have that reaction, and this is just, I should say, when I've had that reaction, it's coming from a space of like projecting how we see ourselves. And I always held myself to this expectation and standard of like, I can never make an ethical violation. I can never make a HIPAA violation. If I missed the memo on one of these things, I thought I was doing things right, but I was wrong. Well, that's on me. I really missed the boat and I should have known better. And so I had that perspective on myself. So if I saw somebody else miss something that I was aware of, I completely projected the same reaction on them. So in my mind, in the moment, when I'm leaving my black and white comment on social media or in group supervision or case consultation and places like that where I definitely did that in the past, it was because I spoke to myself like that in my own internal world. So I think it's quite possible that if we could find a way to be much kinder about how we speak to ourselves internally about these things, then it would be much more accessible to be more compassionate and kinder, but still direct and corrective in how we speak to each other. Now, I'm not saying we should just sort of throw the rules out the window. Not at all. We don't want to say, don't worry about it, HIPAA violation, no big deal, or, whatever the ethical concern is. We want to hold ourselves to a high standard and do everything in our reasonable power to stick by that, stay educated about it, all of that. And at the same time, to know that even when we do the best we can to do things correctly all the time, we will still miss things, or we might not have known a piece of information, we might not have ever heard a differing perspective. So we also have to hold compassion for ourselves if we miss something like that, or, if we disagree with somebody who, maybe something is more gray and it's not like a HIPAA violation or not, but just like, hey, I saw Freud this way and you saw Freud that way, and we have different ways of looking at it. That's interesting. And it's okay. It's okay that we have these different perspectives. So, well, I know that was a big rant, but it felt important. One, to just like confess my own participation in this huge issue, which I still see everywhere. And I think probably primarily because I am in this space where I'm speaking out and I get these comments like mirroring back to me this same behavior that I've done before, and then feeling like, I don't like this. I'm thinking like, I do this. So over time, I've started to, I think, receive that and hopefully make changes in how I approach things with other people. But anyway, one, it's felt important to confess that I've been a participant in this, and also two, to acknowledge, kind of the humanity that's likely happening behind this kind of butting heads thing that very much happens amongst therapists, not just people watching who aren't therapists. The next comment says, critique goes both ways. It is always easier to criticize than being criticized. And I like this comment because as I read it, it's not clear if this person's trying to say like, hey, Marie, you could learn a thing or two about like taking criticism because here, you criticize this other person and then people criticize you for it and you couldn't handle it. That's one take. Or somebody kind of being compassionate, like, hey, yeah, it's so much harder to take critique than it is to criticize somebody else, which, yeah, of course it is. It totally is. So I appreciate that because it's like, but all those perspectives are true. It doesn't even have to have somebody's offering kind of positive or negative judgment on me. But it's so true. And this is something I wish I was that person that's just like, okay, critique. Let's take the constructive parts of it. And then if somehow something was just not constructive or whatever, to just let it roll away and move on. And I am not that person, like, at all. And that's totally fine. Like, I know I don't have to, like, it's okay that I'm so affected by critique. So there's that. I don't know if I have more to say on this because I know there's more comments that are going to touch on this. The next comment says, hi, I'm not one that usually comments, but today I feel it is a must. You don't have to defend yourself. You have a lot of support here. If someone doesn't like your content, then they don't have to watch it. It's that simple. Others who appreciate your work will replace them. Oof, that feels a little harsh. Great job. Please don't stop sharing those harder topics and stating the facts. Now, this is one of those comments where the first time I read it, I'm like, they're right. Thank you. Agreed. And then as I kind of sit with it a little bit, I actually think like, okay, as much as it kind of like would feel kind of like there's a fantasy a little bit of like, they don't have to watch, screw them. I don't think that's helpful because if I'm watching somebody else's content and they share something that I definitely disagree with, if I leave a comment saying that I disagree and here's my reasons why, I would not want them to come back and say like, hey, you don't have to watch if you don't like it. Because maybe the reason why I'm leaving my comment isn't necessarily to be like, I don't like this, ew. It might be like, hey, hey, here's a different take on the same thing. Like, have you thought about it this way maybe? Or, just adding a different perspective into the view of either the creator or other people reading the comments. And it may not even be that I dislike their content, or it might be that I dislike their content, but I don't know. Personally, I'm not going to leave a comment to just be like, I dislike your content, period. Like, I wouldn't watch. I'm like, okay. But if I'm trying to engage in a conversation, even if I disagree, I think somebody should be able to leave that comment. So I do want to receive the criticism content. Now, I will say there is somebody who I have since blocked as a commenter who almost every single video, this was years ago now, almost every single video left like very negative comments on every single video. And I eventually blocked them because they started responding to other people's comments, reacting in the same way, just like degrading other people's character, my own and other commenters, and I blocked them. I can't stand by that. So if you're going to try to take somebody down and say like you're a bad person or that sort of thing, especially if there's any kind of hate speech in there for sure, like I don't need to listen to them. But I do want to tolerate somebody's criticism, and I think it's a good idea to try to find a way to welcome different voices rather than just sort of saying like, oh, don't listen to them. So there's got to be a balanced view. The next comment says, well stated, Marie, you go girl. Thank you. It never ceases to amaze me how hurtful we as mental health professionals can be to others in our field. So true. I've seen this a lot as a group practice owner. It's also rampant on social media, therapist support groups. We can really be the worst. Our own narcissism gets in the way. Amen. Myself included. We can be divas about being right or the hero, the expert, and fail to use the very tools we've been taught to do our job. I find it very interesting that such negativity towards your last video was perhaps a parallel process. After all, you were addressing Freud's own expanded ego. Fair enough. The apple doesn't fall too far from the Freud tree. We professionals can all be a little too full of ourselves and completely miss the mark. However, when we work together and put egos aside, it's absolutely beautiful. We can accomplish so much. That said, keep up these great discussions. Excellent work. Well, thank you. That was a very kind comment, and I think it expands on one of the earlier comments, but speaking specifically to therapist support groups, oh goodness, like I have a love-hate relationship with therapist support groups on platforms like Facebook, for example, because sometimes I really need input from other therapists, and so I might post on something like that or need a referral or something. But sometimes even in like the simplest of questions, like the kinds of responses that I get really do just touch on what I was talking about before of like, don't you know this already? Or like, you should ethically already know, Marie, like the answer to this, when it might be like, hey, like I've never filled out an FMLA form before, and like, does anyone have any advice for such and such part of the form? And then like something so benign and like seemingly not polarizing like that can somehow devolve in the comments to like people trying to one-up each other on like how much they know about something, when it's literally like, hey, I'm trying to help my client with their FMLA form or whatever the thing is. And it's now like therapists like puffing themselves up against each other in the thread, and it's like, I don't need this. But I really do need help, so I'm still going to show up and ask my question. Oh dear, we can all do it. And again, I have been that person. And in fact, there's this phase in my life when I did that more so like circa 2015, 2016, which was the phase when I was like deconstructing my whole life, let's just put it that way, and including my relationship with my family growing up, and like deconstructing the narcissistic like system that I grew up in. And I was totally like commenting on other people's YouTube channels at that time, and I wish I could remember. Is there a way that you can go back on YouTube and view your old comments? That's a question, because I don't remember which videos or which creators I left comments on, and I can't even remember what I said, but I just remember that I was holding that same tone, that same like, you should know this, and let me correct you because I know the answer, and it's like, ugh, but like I did that. So if you're one of those people and you're watching, I'm so sorry. If it was circa like 2015, 2016, maybe 2017, a little bit, and I left a comment that you didn't like, I deeply apologize. Tell me about it so I can like delete it, or you can delete it. You have my full permission. The next comment says, yeah, let's agree to disagree. It's okay to have different opinions, of course. Often people think that in order to have a good relationship, you should agree on everything, and if you don't, you're enemies. I personally do not think so. Just be respectful and be willing to tolerate that someone else may have a different perspective. Could it be that some people suppress their anger in real life, trying to always be nice and being afraid to express a disagreement or to argue, and when it comes out disagreeing with someone online, a person they will never meet, all the suppressed anger came out? Well, that's an interesting take. I'm not sure. Marie, I enjoy your videos. I think you are brave to say what you think. Thank you. I often avoid sharing what I think because I am afraid. That's why I chose, that last line is why I chose this comment as one to kind of respond to. That is my deepest fear. Not that I'm going to shut my mouth because I'm afraid of criticism, but like everyone's going to shut their mouth because they're afraid of criticism. And it's usually like in my opinion, it's the people who are most afraid to share that have the most valuable things to say. And that's maybe like, who knows, maybe I'm just projecting, like I'm always here for the underdog, but like when I'm working with therapy clients, when I'm interacting with in supervision consult groups, or just, friends, or even like thinking of like my daughter, my oldest daughter, who can be prone to being extremely quiet. It's usually like those are the voices that I really want to hear. And we could take that on a like more systemic scale. Like, it's often women's voices who are silenced over men, or who are more afraid to speak. It's often, BIPOC folks who are silenced over others. I mean, like on and on and on. So I would love it if we could, for those who are comfortable sharing their voices, and I'll include myself in that mix, if we could find ways to be very compassionate while clear and opinionated and all of those things, but compassionate, acknowledging the humanity of the other people that we're speaking to in how we offer our commentary, whether it's online or in person, then that might help people who feel afraid to speak feel more capable of voicing their opinion. And those are the voices that we need to listen to. So thank you for that comment, because it felt like, I know I touched on that in the video itself, but like that's my biggest fear, is like the people who are silenced because they never even shared their opinion because they don't want anyone to react. It's not like I said something and then someone reacted and I didn't like it. It's I never even said it because I don't know what people are going to say. I mean, or think. Oh, let's change it together. Let's try. All right, I have to brace a little bit for this one. I agree that no one needs to be polarizing in their opinion, but honestly, you had precisely a overly critical view on Freud and didn't like when that was thrown back at you. No one in the world thinks the man was a saint or a perfect professional. He was a man of his time, and due to making groundbreaking work, obviously would end up becoming controversial and plainly wrong in many aspects. But still, he was groundbreaking, and it's not small feat to create the therapy setting format that you base your whole profession on. I believe in most of what you quoted, but your merely opinionated remarks were just obnoxious and very judgy, especially coming from a therapist that expects other therapists to have more empathic comments. I mean, I'm open. I do have a clear bias. I think it would be unrealistic for me to say like I'm unbiased in my perspective about Freud. I clearly have a bias, as you could clearly see in the video that I made about Freud. Was it overly judgy? What aspects of it make it judgy? I think maybe I'd be helped by that. So I'd be curious to hear more. Feel free to offer your feedback. Like, is it like me making emotional faces? Is it the tone that I'm speaking in? Is it that I included data about this but not about that? Like, I would love the specifics, genuinely. And I don't mean that, I hope it doesn't sound defensive. I don't want to mean it defensively, just like, I need help seeing the judgy part. Like, tell me. I would love to hear it. Also, I will say, and in my very biased opinion and perspective, after editing that Freud video, I unearthed so much more stuff about Freud, and my opinion actually just swayed even more biased in the same direction it already was. And the purpose of this video isn't to like deep dive back into Freud again, and I don't even know if I want to like do another deep dive video on Freud, because maybe that was enough for me. But basically, like, all the things that he was groundbreaking on, I don't want to say all the things, maybe all the things, most of the things, but maybe all the things that he had a groundbreaking take on, that we still lean on today, and all of that were things that he took from other people and then claimed as his own, which I've seen that happening time and time again in history and in modern times. I don't like to name names about people in modern times because I don't want to be sued. I hope you can have compassion on my preference to not be sued. But there are some significant influencers of our modern times who, when you dig into their stories, have taken the work from others and then claimed it as their own and then kicked the others to the curb. And that's a story that's happened over and over and over and over again and is still happening, and that's something that feels important to shed light on in history. One, because if I shed light on it happening today, then I might get sued and then I wouldn't really be able to speak on it anymore. But also so that hopefully we can just see that it's a pattern, and do something about it. So there's those thoughts. I did open the Freud door again. I don't know if I'm gonna do a follow-up video on Freud. I don't know if I'm ready for that. But genuinely, I would love the feedback on, like, tell me about the obnoxious and judgy stuff. Can you give me a timestamp? Can you give me a screen grab or a quote of like, hey, when you said this, I didn't like how it came across for these reasons. That would be super helpful to me. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, let's offer constructive feedback. Oh yeah, here's another one that's a little hard for me to read. They're quoting me. I'm not asking you to comment on my character or my motives. And then they say, you mean like you did in your video about Freud? All right, let me clarify a bit what I meant by this, because it feels important. I still stand by what I said in that quote. when I post a video, or anyone shares anything, sharing their opinion or perspective or belief or whatever, sharing anything, when somebody responds to that by using language like, you should know better, I thought you were smarter than that, you don't have the qualifications to speak on that, it's such a sweeping commentary back that may or may not have any accuracy to it, but it's certainly not useful. Like, so if I say, I invite your critique, but please don't comment on my character, what I mean is, tell me your feedback, like, I disagreed with what you said here because of that, or it was the tone of voice that you used that made me feel like you were being judgy. You know, here's the thing that you did or said and how I interpret that, or how I disagree with that, or whatever it may be. Take that kind of approach rather than saying like, hey, you're not smart enough to talk about this. I don't think that's ever a productive conversation to say, okay, well, great, now I feel like crap and I have no criticism to go off of except you're just telling me to not talk anymore. So thanks. Okay, and one more. This one just kind of, this one was a ride. So one commenter says, hey Marie, I'm one of the guys in the thumbnail, because I had taken a thumbnail and put some quotes in the thumbnail for this video. Thanks. I'd like to add that even if we vastly disagree on the whole Freud topic, I deeply appreciate your work, your videos, your newsletter, and style. Adding this would have helped in the perception of my comment on that video. For sure, it seemed very bitter. Keep up the good work. And I read this comment and I felt like truly moved by it. I thought like this was such a picture of what I hope for to say. This person saying, hey, I stand by what I said, but you know, maybe the way I said it, I could have said it in a way that might have been more helpful. So I appreciate that. And I responded, thank you for this comment. It truly means a lot. And I hope it also models for others reading the comments how we can hold different perspectives while also being respectful. Wishing you well. And then another person responded to my response and they said, wait, so you made a comment about her cherry picking in the original video and then she cherry picked from your comment? That's pretty wild. And I read that and I thought, which part did I cherry pick? And that one I'm genuinely, I think I'm sharing this one because it seemed like, from my perception at least, like me and the original commenter had this positive interaction, I thought, where they were showing up and saying, hey, I stand by what I said, but like, I could have phrased it better, excuse me, appreciate you. And then me coming back and saying, cool, I appreciate you, thank you for this. And then somebody else saying I cherry picked from their comment. It felt like we're pushing the rewind button or something. Like, wait, we were going in the right direction. You're trying to pull us back into a black and white approach or something. And if, again, please, if I'm totally missing something on this, like genuinely, I'm confused. What if I missed something here? So tell me what I missed. What did I cherry pick? I don't know. But, you know, I don't know if there's anything else I want to say on that, but there's that. Whew. There was a lot of stuff in there. I appreciate you joining me for the ride. I hope it's okay that I made this style of video. This is just what I felt like making today. So here we are. And I hope it was helpful to hear my answers and feedback, commentary on some of the comments that have popped up in my videos. And part of my goal in sharing this is, you know, just want to humanize, like, there's a real human leaving the comment. I'm a real human reading your comment and responding back to your comments. I think in internet land, it is really easy to just like forget that there's real people on the other side of the comment or the YouTube screen or whatever. And so I think that probably was part of my motivation in wanting to record this video. And like, this is kind of as close as I can get in our current context to kind of having a human to human interaction to say like, you left a comment on my video, now I'm responding. And it's not the same as having you sit here and like talking to you, but this is what I can access. So I think that's probably what part of me wanted when I made this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. Whether you've commented before, you've never commented, this is the first video you've ever seen, thanks for being here. I appreciate you, and wherever you're at in life, whatever you got going on, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.